Let us now study Spinocerebellar tracts. Spinocerebellar tracts form one of the three major ascending pathways from spinal cord. The other two are dorsal column pathways and spinothalamic pathway. Spinocerebellar tracts include two tracts which carry information from lower limbs and trunk, that is posterior spinocerebellar tract and anterior spinocerebellar tract, and two corresponding tracts which carry information from the upper limbs, that is Cuneocerebellar Tract and Rostral Spinocerebellar Tract. Spinocerebellar tracts differ from those tracts which carry information to the cerebrum in having only two neurons along their path, and also cerebellum has an ipsilateral representation unlike cerebrum which has a contralateral representation. So the fibers in the spinocerebellar tract are not required to cross over to the opposite side. And if they do cross, then they cross back before reaching the same-sided cerebellar cortex. These fibers ascend from spinal cord to the brainstem, and then via one of the cerebellar peduncles, they reach the cerebellum. So the tracts are not found above the level of midbrain. Spinocerebellar tracts convey non-conscious proprioception and exteroception information to the cerebellum, which is important for coordination of movements. The major receptors are the neuromuscular spindles and Golgi tendon organs. Posterior spinocerebellar tract begins at the level of L2 or L3 segment. Its neurons are located in lamina 7 or in Clark's column. As you see on the right hand side, Clark's column extends from C8 to L3 segment, and that is why the tract begins at the level of L3. The fibers carrying non-conscious proprioception and exteroception information are of type 1A, type 1B and type 2 fibers, and these have their cell bodies in the dorsal root ganglion. They enter the spinal cord passing through the medial stream of dorsal root. They are present in all the spinal nerves below the level of T1 segment. Once they reach the dorsal column, they send their collaterals to the neurons present in Clark's column. These neurons will form the second order neurons. Clark's column is also called as nucleus thoracis or nucleus dorsalis. Axons of this Clark's column neurons will pass to the same-sided lateral funiculus and ascend as posterior spinocerebellar tract. So the posterior spinocerebellar tract contains ipsilateral fibers. Anterior spinocerebellar tract begins from the neurons which are located in Laminae 5, 6 and 7 in the lumbosacral cord. Subsequent fibers are added at the thoracic segment levels. Similar to posterior spinocerebellar tract, the fibers which carry this information are also belonging to type 1A, 1B or type 2 fibers. They have their neuronal cell bodies in the dorsal root ganglion. They reach the spinal cord through the medial stream, and they are present in all the spinal nerves below the level of T1. Once they reach the dorsal column, they send their collaterals to the neurons present in lamina 5, 6 and 7. These neurons form the second order neurons. Now, axons of these neurons cross to the opposite side, reach the lateral funiculus and ascend as anterior spinocerebellar tract. So, anterior spinocerebellar tract is made up of contralateral fibers. Let us look into the somatotopy. As was the case with spinothalamic tract fibers, at every level, when a particular segment fiber enters the tract, it displaces the lower segmental fibers outwards. So if you look at the spinal cord section at the level of cervical segments, then in the tract, the outermost fibers are the sacral fibers. Inside that will be the lumbar, followed by thoracic, and the innermost will be the cervical, as shown in this picture. So for the posterior spinocerebellar tract, the first order neurons are located in the dorsal root ganglion. Second order neurons are located in the Clark's column. Axons of this Clark's column ascend in the same level as posterior spinocerebellar tract, reach the medulla oblongata, where they join with the inferior cerebellar peduncle to reach the cerebellum. Posterior spinocerebellar tract, the first order neurons are located in the dorsal root ganglion. The second order neurons are located in the laminae 5, 6 and 7. Axons of these neurons cross to the opposite side, ascend as the contralateral anterior spinocerebellar tract, reaches all the way to the upper pons or junction between pons and the midbrain, where this tract will join with the superior cerebellar peduncle. Fibers will then cross back within the superior cerebellar peduncle or within the white matter of cerebellum to reach the same-sided cerebellar cortex. Let us see where these tracts are located in spinal cord as well as in different sections of brainstem. So in the spinal cord, the posterior and anterior spinocerebellar tracts are located along the lateral circumference between the posterolateral sulcus and anterolateral sulcus. Posterior half of this circumference is made up of posterior spinocerebellar tract, which carries ipsilateral fibers. Anterior half is made up of anterior spinocerebellar tract, which carries contralateral fibers. At the level of pyramidal decussation, medulla shows these fibers located again along the lateral rim. So is the case in medulla at the level of sensory decussation. When we reach the medulla, where it is open, having the cavity of central canal opened as the cavity of fourth ventricle, the posterolateral corners are occupied by a large fiber bundle called as inferior cerebellar peduncle. The posterior spinocerebellar tract fibers join with this inferior cerebellar peduncle here. So hereafter, they are no more seen as a separate entity. We can still see the anterior spinocerebellar tract as a separate entity here. In case of lower pons again, we cannot see posterior spinocerebellar tract as separate from inferior cerebellar peduncle, but anterior spinocerebellar tract is seen as a separate entity. The anterior spinocerebellar tract will join the superior cerebellar peduncle at the level of upper pons. So the posterior spinocerebellar tract reaches the cerebellum through inferior cerebellar peduncle, whereas the anterior one reaches the cerebellum through the superior cerebellar peduncle. Both posterior and anterior spinocerebellar tracts carry information from the lower limbs. Posterior spinocerebellar tract, however, carries modality-specific and space-specific information from individual muscles. Now, this information is important for fine coordination, whereas anterior spinocerebellar tracts carry the multimodal information from multiple segments of the limbs, and this information is important for coordinated movement as well as maintaining the posture of entire limb. Now coming to the upper limb equivalent tracts, let us start with Cuneocerebellar tract. The fibers of the Cuneocerebellar tracts are at the upper limb segment level. They ascend with the fibers of fasciculus cuneatus. They reach the level of sensory decussation in medulla, where we know that lateral to the cuneate nucleus, we have the accessory cuneate nucleus. When the fasciculus cuneatus fibers relay in the nucleus cuneatus, they send the collaterals to the accessory cuneate nucleus, which relay in that particular nucleus. Axons of that nucleus will emerge as posterior external arcuate fibers. These posterior external arcuate fibers join together to form the cuneocerebellar tract. At the level of open medulla, this cuneocerebellar tract will have joined with the inferior cerebellar peduncle, and through the inferior cerebellar peduncle, this tract will reach the cerebellum. Now coming to the rostral spinocerebellar tract, again, these fibers are type 1A, 1B or type 2 fibers. They are having their cell bodies located in the dorsal root ganglion, and they enter the spinal cord through the medial stream of dorsal root, similar to the anterior spinocerebellar tract, but these fibers are present only in the upper limb segment levels. Again, once these fibers enter the dorsal column, they send their collaterals to the neurons which are located in lamina 5, 6 or 7. Now the axons of these neurons, however, reach the same sided lateral funiculus and ascend as rostral spinocerebellar tract, and these fibers will be mixed with the fibers of anterior spinocerebellar tract. So the rostral spinocerebellar tract has ipsilateral fibers. So let us see the tracts here. The rostral spinocerebellar tract fibers, first order neurons in the dorsal root ganglion, second order neurons located in lamina 5, 6 and 7. These axons ascend on the same side, reach the medulla. In the medulla, they join with inferior cerebellar peduncle and reach the cerebellum. Coming to the cuneocerebellar tract fibers, they have their first order neurons in the dorsal root ganglion. When they reach spinal cord, they ascend along the fasciculus cuneatus. When they reach the medulla, these fibers relay in the accessory cuneate nucleus, which form the second order neurons. Axons of these will emerge as posterior external arcuate fibers, which join together to form the cuneocerebellar tract. This cuneocerebellar tract again joins with the inferior cerebellar peduncle and reaches the cerebellum. So looking at the functions, both cuneocerebellar tract and rostral spinocerebellar tract carry information from the upper limbs. Cuneocerebellar tract carries modality-specific and space-specific information from individual muscles, which is needed for fine coordination, and rostral spinocerebellar tract carries multimodal information from multiple segments of the limbs, which is required for coordinated movement as well as maintaining the posture of entire limb. So the cuneocerebellar tracts are the posterior spinocerebellar tract equivalent for upper limb, and rostral spinocerebellar tracts are the anterior spinocerebellar tract equivalent for the upper limb. Thank you very much. We will consider the lesion to these tracts along with cerebellar lesions. You can visit this site for other videos in the neuroanatomy. Thank you.